Welcome to the Her Voice Shines podcast, where we celebrate the power, brilliance, and resilience of women everywhere. I'm your host, Chenadra Washington. Join us as we share inspiring stories and insights from extraordinary women who have found their voice and are making a difference. Together, we'll create a ripple effect, illuminating the path to visibility and empowerment. Let's break barriers, shatter ceilings, and lift each other up. In each episode, we dive deep into the journeys of women who have turned their challenges into triumphs and their dreams into reality. Whether you're looking for motivation, guidance, or a community that understands your journey, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and remember, let your voice shine. Well, you know what time it is. We have reached another episode of Her Voice Shines. Man, time is passing and we are growing increasingly every day, and these stories just keep getting better and better. And today it's no different. I am your beautiful host based in Houston, Texas. And as always, we have another beautiful lady to share her story, and we waste no time around here. She'll come around, tell us her name, where she's streaming from, and like always, she jumps right into that story. And without any further waiting time, here's our beautiful guest.
Hi, my name is Caroline Smith, streaming from Auburn, Alabama, and I am the founder of the Introverted Misfit, where I help socially awkward and anxious introverted women become socially confident versions of themselves without having to fake being someone that they're not. So the story of me, it really starts all the way back in my childhood. So from a very young age, I would say my first grade year of school is how my parents told it to me. My parents and other family members began to notice some pretty distinct differences in how I would communicate and interact with others versus how other peers my age were communicating and interacting and socializing with other people. So now I've always been quiet and introverted, hence the name, the Introverted Misfit, a little more shy even. But based on the behaviors that they were noticing in my childhood, I'd say it was clear that this was deeper than me just being more quiet and introverted. I was having troubles with basic, social and communication skills, things like having no concept of facial expressions, having trouble with my vocal inflection. Like for the longest time, I had a very monotone voice for, basically all of my middle school and high school years. Had trouble holding conversations, my conversational skills, trouble picking up on social cues. Basically, not showing any emotion whatsoever. Like I would feel emotions, but I wouldn't show them in the way that most people would. Not knowing when it's appropriate for certain conversations to be held, the concept of there's a time and a place for everything. Basically, those important social and communication skills that are so important for people to have, I struggled with them naturally. And it seemed like I was just completely closed off to any sort of interactions with my peers, maybe not interested in doing all those normal socialization things that people my age were doing. It was very hard for me to create and maintain lasting friendships pretty much all throughout my schooling years, even past my college years, in the beginning of my career as a software engineer, which is that's what I went to school for. So that was my first career. But it wasn't that I didn't want to socialize with my peers. It was just that I couldn't. And I really didn't have any idea why I was the way that I was. I just knew that I had a lot of trouble socializing the way that most normal people would. And I've used this analogy before. It felt like I was sitting on the sidelines and watching all of my peers my age play this really fun and exciting game. And I couldn't play because I didn't know the rules. And nobody would sit down and explain the rules to me. And the game that I'm referring to in this analogy is, you could call it the game of human connection or human communication. So these struggles continue all the way up to a point in high school. And that's when my parents decide to take me to a psychologist to see if they can get to the root of what's causing all of these issues with my communication, right? And that's when I get diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, or as it's now known as Autistic Spectrum Disorder. For short, that's called ASD. So ASD is basically a neurological disorder that affects my ability to communicate and interact the way that most people do, and particularly in the way that most women do, right? Because in my experience, women are known for being sort of the backbones of community, like a lot more sociable and community oriented, emotionally intelligent, all of those things. And so, at that point, I remember, and my parents were also happy with this diagnosis. It might sound weird, but we were happy in that we finally had an explanation for why I struggled so much with my social and communication skills, and struggled to create lasting relationships and in both my personal and my professional life with family, friends, anyone really. And so, to make a longer story short, I took a year to do some counseling, took a couple of years dedicated to, I would say, really reinventing myself and relearning everything that I instinctually knew about healthy communication and socialization. And I will say, I think that those instincts, I think, were in me all along, but because of my neurological disorder, it just took a lot of extra effort on my part to connect with those instincts, and to hone those skills while still being the, more quiet, introverted woman that I am. And, so that's really the story behind me, the story behind my brand. So yeah.
Yeah, and that was a great story. It really was. And you've told it, you know, I thought the communication was perfect. Like, and this is not like a face value thing, but hearing that and seeing you present the story in this space, it almost doesn't make a connection because you've owned it so beautifully and you've told it in a way that I've understand that I really understood that journey. So first of all, for your parents to have to kind of go through that, I can only imagine they were really wondering, like, okay, what's going on? And you have all these diagnoses, to finally, get to the autism spectrum. So let's talk a little bit about relationships, because I know that part was part of the challenge. Can you kind of talk to me now about relationships, and can you remember the first relationship that stuck, whether that was a peer or a mate? Because you may have had some times where like, it's socially awkward thing. What do relationships look like now? And then what was that first bridge to you think having a relationship where you could fully be yourself and understand what was going on with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of have two. One of them, I would say the non-familial relationship that really stuck is a friend that I knew her in high school as an acquaintance. We didn't really talk much. We sat in some of the same classes and we did some projects together in high school, middle school and high school. But, because of my deficits, my communication and social deficits, I just never really started that, tried to start that relationship back then. And then here we are years later. I'd say about 2 years ago, we actually ended up reconnecting because her mom is my mom's hairstylist. And so that's how, she kind of came back into the picture. And then, I would say that's the first non-familial one that I really, I can say that is a lasting and a genuine relationship that I cherish so much. And the other one that I have is probably one that you would least expect, but it's my own sister. So I have two older sisters, but my eldest sister, funny story, also has autistic spectrum disorder, but she got her diagnosis a lot later in her life than I did because there's a 12-year age gap between us. So I was lucky in that I got mine earlier. She got hers when she was like in her early 30s, I think. And so, quick story, because of my social and communication skills deficits, my sister, that eldest sister that also has ASD, she actually wouldn't talk to me for, it was like 6 months. And we were living in the same house, which sounds crazy, but that's how bad it got, the communication wall that it had gotten with me. And that's how differently it was manifesting in me, you know, rather than in her, which, it didn't cause as many um, communication flaws in her as it did with me. Maybe in her ability to like socialize and make friends, but she's always been a very, emotional and loving person. And I guess it just manifested in me differently. So we butted heads a lot with that. And, that 6 month period, once it was over and I finally, had my awakening and decided that I need to apologize, for the way that I've been acting, even though, those communication deficits had always been there. It was just, I guess it was all bubbling up at that same time because we were both growing older and willing to deal with a lot less. So I really had to do some work to rekindle that relationship with my own sister, so yeah, those are the two relationships that I would say are like the first ones out of my stage of reinventing myself, where I can say I'm proud that I got those relationships right, and hopefully I'm still getting those relationships right.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that self-awareness piece, because it's definitely interesting how that self-work and like the self-awareness can redefine relationships. So I think that story of, being in the same house with someone and then after a certain time having a redefined relationship, that's very powerful. So thanks in sharing that. Have to ask you this. Most people, I mean, that are meeting me now in this stage in my life, they don't believe that I'm a strong introvert. They're like, what? I'm like, if you knew me in my past life, and I like to refer to my past life as being circa 2019. I had a rebirth. I had a rebirth, if you will.
Okay.
I had a rebirth. And, most people that know me from my past, like I was just really the quiet girl. And I could do the work. I had the work ethic. I could get straight A's. I could do all those things. But there was just a part of me that I just didn't care to be social, really. Like it wore me out. And still, honestly, today, Caroline, let's be clear, it still wears me out. So there, how are you, now doing a podcast and things of this nature? Because now I'm in service mode. This is a space where I can serve and I feel comfortable to control. Here's my schedule. Here's who I'm talking to. But I still have, even to this date, as all the things that people have seen me do, speak on stages, do this, that, and the third, there's still something in me that's very introverted, something still in me that has to recharge. And when I saw your application, it was another thing that spooked me a little bit because you use the term misfit. In my first business name, I changed it, but my first business name used the word misfit. I actually have a product.
Oh.
I actually have a product that's on the shelf that I've never put out, and it's really around operating in business as an introvert. So when I saw this introvert thing, and I saw the word misfit, Caroline just jumped off the screen to me because I got it. I just honestly got it. I want to talk to you about the word misfit specifically. I want you to describe that as what it means to you, and then what are you kind of doing, or I guess your mission, to maybe deconstruct that word, if that makes sense.
That's another interesting question. So by misfit, I really just, it's kind of a play on my diagnosis with autistic spectrum disorder, in saying that someone who has struggled or maybe still struggles to fit in the way that most other people do. That's what I mean by a misfit. It's not, and I understand that it can sometimes be like it can have a negative connotation, because misfit is like, maybe a social outcast, or someone who's been like exiled from society, but I would say I'm reclaiming that word by helping women accept the little awkward bits that are in them, because even though I had to go through my period of time to really hone in my social and communication skills, there's still some social awkwardness in me. There's still I have a few awkward tendencies, even when I have to speak in front of people, and, speak to people, and I can see their reaction sometimes to my awkward tendencies. And, I have um, the ability to discern if, okay, are they reacting that way because they're like a little bit unnerved by something awkward that I said or did? Or are they going to accept this part of me and just, accept that I'm just an awkward person, I'm still a misfit. So yeah, that's what I mean by misfit. And that's how I'm trying to reclaim the word for other misfits out there.
Oh, I get it. So do you find yourself still in that questioning pattern? I noticed that when you were closing that question out, you kind of asked this questioning pattern. Will they feel a certain way about if I say this thing? Do you still find yourself in that same questioning pattern as you are going out into social interactions?
Yes. I would say it doesn't happen as often as it did when I was younger, because, I've matured a little bit and really worked on those skills, really worked on this thing that my dad always used to tell me. And it's also a pretty common saying. I'm sure you know it and your audience knows it, but there's a time and a place for everything, right? So you can't do or say anything that's on your mind, even though you may want to. There's a time and a place for everything. So yeah, it does not happen, thankfully, as much as it used to, because I have more control over it. But I think I'm getting a lot better at reading, what kind of people will react better to those, slightly awkward tendencies of mine versus who I probably shouldn't, say or do something with.
Yeah, that's good. And that goes back to that level of self-awareness, even as you're processing, your intricacies in those spaces. So let me ask you this. I know that that you're building, I mean, I don't know how long you've been working on it. I know you mentioned software development as your kind of main trade. And this looks to be birthed based on your personal experience and wanting to help people in that space. Are there any other cues or any other indications that you wanted to go into business for yourself, or that you look at entrepreneurship as like, a thing to do? And how does that tie into your personal mission?
Yeah, I would say in hindsight, I think the cues were there, but maybe I didn't know it at the time. At the time when you're in high school, you're just, and in college, you're going through the track that everybody's really telling you to take, which is, get good grades in school, figure out what you want to major in, go get the major, get the degree and get the job, and then do a good job at your job for years to come, right? That's the track that I grew up hearing and that I just always assumed that I would do. But I've always been um I've always been creative and had multiple interests. Like it was always hard for me to just focus on one thing for a long time without, having another interest that I also want to focus on, which is which is what I think is, an attribute of an entrepreneur is somebody who's creative, wants to create their own space in this world rather than, going the path that is supposed to be, they're supposed to be taking. Right. So yeah, I've always had those creative tendencies, and those a multifaceted interests. And, so I started off my software engineering career for about, up to this point, 3 years, and I still have that job. I'm working on this business, the Introverted Misfit, in pretty much all of my downtime. But even after 3 years being a software engineer, staring at a computer for like 8 hours a day, with no end in sight, and just, staring at code and using the really analytical parts my mind, somewhere along the way, I just realized that, with my new communication skills and my new social skills and my ability to make those, relationships and make connections, even if they don't result in lasting relationships, I got bored of using that analytical side of my mind all the time. And so that's when after 2 years of doing that job, that's when the wheels really started to turn. Like, okay, how can I use this? Because, computers and software engineering is notoriously not a industry to go in if you like making connections with people, even just on a one-on-one basis, because it's mostly computer work. And there's a lot of techie people a lot of men also. It's a male dominated industry where, they're pretty much just one track. Let's get this work done, not very interested in, creating those kind of relationships from my experience anyway. So yeah, that's, I would say the cues were always there. Maybe I just didn't pick up on them until a little bit later.
Yeah, I think that's the same about my journey. I kept on really asking, like, what can I do with this? How do I sell this? How do I step into it? So still, honestly, I've been away from corporate since 2021. I really say 2022 is when I really started. I got to take some time off in between. But now I'm really starting to figure that out, and then stepping in it is still always that level of, okay, what are you going to do the next step, and how can I best use my qualities in this space, to where you say you don't get stuck in that one track mind of, just being analytical. What can I do to make sure that all of my brain is engaged? Because I'm pretty sure I'll be happier that way, being able to tap and play across those areas. So let's just future track. Hopefully we ain't got a future track too much, because this is about to be done, right? The Introverted Misfit is in the earth already. Let's just say that it is. And someone has gone through the course, someone has picked it up and they've gone through it, and now they're getting Carolina review. What are you hoping that they're saying about this program? What type of transformation are you hoping that happen by them finishing this program from start to finish?
Yeah, I would say I really want them to come away knowing that social skills are not just because you're socially awkward, whether you're autistic or not. My target audience is women who struggle socially and with communication. That the autism part is just, the way that the social awkwardness manifests for me, but it's for any woman who struggles in those areas. I want them to know that communication and social skills are not something that has to be foreign to them for the rest of their lives. They can learn them. It's a skill that they can learn, and it may take them a little longer than, maybe than it took other people, that they've witnessed other people just, be sociable by nature. Because I have another sister, a middle sister, and she is, when I tell you she's an extrovert by definition, she just walks in and it's like she just automatically knows how to socialize and how to get people off their feet. She's one of those life of the party people. And, I was surrounded by a lot of those kinds of people while being my introverted and socially awkward self. And, I want other women who go through this course to know that they can communicate and socialize in their own way without having to fake being someone they're not, without having to fake being this, extra sociable extrovert who's the life of the party. They can be themselves, of course, with the right communication and social skills, right? And by doing that, they can attract the type of people that will fit best in their lives. They're what you put out, you're going to attract. And so, yeah, that's what I want people who take my course to walk away with.
So as this thing grows and builds, because trust me, there's a market. I would have at some point been your target audience, right? If if I hadn't, started to really do the self work. Networking it's been a tricky walk for me. And I was telling myself, when I was getting out there to do that, I mean, I had like a safety net with COVID, right? Because my business was birthed in COVID. So I still got to do things really from the comforts of Zoom and all these other places, Teams and everything else. But once it lifted and then in person started coming back, and I was like, oh, okay. And then, I can actually speak, and I'm a really good speaker, but I'm like, how am I going to build around this, knowing that I only have a capacity for so much of it? Just from you, what are you committed to do in the space of networking for the introverted misfit? Because this is a real life conversation I have, and I still have, because sometimes, Caroline, I be wanting to cancel on them people, but
I'm the same way.
I'm still pulling through, and it is a daily thing. So I want you to talk about your commitment. If you're really believing for this thing to do something, which I believe that it can, what is your commitment around the networking piece?
Yeah. So that was another struggle for me early on. Well, not when I started the business, but really when I was, for the year that I was laying the groundwork and getting into the mindset to create this business, that was something that I knew I was going to struggle with already. Number one, from being the introvert. Number two, from still, being my slightly awkward self. Right. And so, I had to think about it a lot, because when I was doing the research to start this business, all I kept hearing everybody say is, you got to network, you got to collaborate. You're not going to get anywhere by yourself. You have to be willing to talk to others and go to those networking events, even though you may not want to, because they're important for your business. It's important for getting your name out there, for creating important relationships with people who are, in the same space as you or not in the same space as you. Every professional relationship could yield some sort of positive results. You never know, right? And so, I had to really take that year and just get it in my head that if you're going to do this, you need to do it the right way. And so that's when I really committed to, okay, I'm not going to be afraid of people hearing my voice anymore, right? I'm not going to be afraid that somebody is going to think my idea is too stupid to hear me out or to have me on their platform. I'm just going to reach out and understand that I know the worth of my business, because I'm the one who needed this business back then. And so that I know there are other people out there who need it. So I'm just going to have confidence in that. And I'm going to put my best foot forward when I'm reaching out for, podcasting collaboration opportunities and things of that nature. And I will say I'm in the works on trying to build up the courage to go to like an in-person networking event, because the thought of that, it kind of just overwhelms me. I much prefer one-on-one conversations, because I'm an introvert. I really don't like being in crowded places where there are a lot of things going on at once. I like to just focus on one or a few people at one time. But I'm getting there. It's on my priority list to go to at least one networking event before this year is over, and trying to see how many people can I really make a connection with. So to answer your question, it was definitely a big problem for me when this business wasn't even a thing yet, when I was still thinking about it. But I just had to eventually make the commitment to do it, because I realized that you're not going to have success, both profitable success or success in helping others like you, if you don't do those networking things.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you have made like the declaration of like a real tangible goal. You said one in-person networking event, and that kind of keeps you accountable to get there, and knowing that, we've transitioned into August, where am I going to show up? So just keep that in mind as we, proceed to close out the year. Now, I want to, before we go, Caroline, I know this is, still new, but I want people to know how to connect with you and where to find you. So if you can give them information, and also too, if you have any tentative dates, maybe you don't, of as to when the program will be available, around what time, give us that, and then where we can find you.
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me at theintrovertedmisfit.com. That's my website. And on there, you can reach my contact page via the navigation. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn via my contact page. I'm excited to announce that I have my first episode up for my podcast, which is called the Introverted Misfit podcast. So that's now available on Apple and Spotify, and also hosted on my website as well, if you don't have one of those. And to find the podcast, you can go to theintrovertedmisfit.com/podcast, and that should get you where you need to go, whether you want to do Spotify, Apple, or listen to it on my website. And as far as the course, which is still in the works, and the plan is that the course is going to be called Communicate with Quiet Confidence. And it's going to be specifically for introverted women who struggle with social awkwardness and social anxiety. And as far as tentative dates for that course, I'm going to say it will be out by the end of the year, but I don't have an exact date yet, because I'm still, worried about getting everything right, trying to make sure that the quality is going to be good and that I deliver. So, still in the process of getting a few people that I know to go through the course and give me some feedback so that I can use it to go back and, change the things and make it better before I make it available to the public. So, yeah.
That's great. And kudos for the podcast. I think it's a needed podcast. It's a good space, I think, for podcasts and really the nature of likely what you're going to cover. I'm just going to give this little piece of advice, is that likely the content is already good. So keep that in mind. Okay.
Okay.
And although, we may be wanting people to go through it and everything, and talk after, but likely 9 out of 10 is ready to go, and us having people go through and trying to get it to this pristine condition puts us further back, not only in time but also to in dollars. But that's a different conversation. I want to cue here so that you can get your final thoughts, and then we can close out this episode. So if people pick up nothing else from this space that we've shared together, Caroline, we're going to cue to your final thoughts, and we'll be back to close.
Okay, final thoughts. Well, I would say I know that my brand and my target audience is, even though it's specifically introverted women, that's specifically, but more broadly, my brand, I hope that people can learn that, with the right communication and social skills, you can make connections every day with anybody, being your authentic self, without having to fake being someone you're not. In my case, it just so happens that I'm an introvert, and I had to learn that I don't have to act like someone that I'm not, like the life of the party or like an extrovert, to make friends. I just have to, be myself, and I will attract the kind of people that are supposed to be in my life. And so that's what I hope that anybody, can learn from my business.
I love it. And y'all, I know I say this often, but this has really been a good episode. Because I've had a lot of different parallels. So to see Caroline so early on in her life and career tackling this now versus waiting to much older like I did when I finally tackled it is very beautiful to see. And I wish that young ladies can get this type of education earlier on, so you don't have to be near midlife to finally say, okay, I'm coming out of this thing and I'm going to make this communicating with confidence a thing. So I honor you today in your fight, Caroline. It was such an honor to have you on here today. I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for listening to the Her Voice Shines podcast. And until next time, remember to let your voice shine, and we will be back with another episode soon. We love you.